What's up, everybody? Welcome again to the Chasing Creativity podcast. This is episode 21 with electronic music producer Johann Stone. How's it going, everybody? All right, we are here, episode 21, starting off 2019 with a bang. This episode is awesome. Before we jump into anything else, thank you to Johann Stone for coming on and having this conversation. I might as well just jump into it right now. We talk about microdosing of psychedelic drugs, and it's absolutely fascinating. Fascinating. So before I get more into that, let's talk a little bit about the music that was just shown out. So that song that we just heard is from a friend of the podcast named Brent Gee. That song was titled Welcome to Saturn. So go check out his music. If you'd like to hear more, you can find him on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Brent Gee. That's G-E-E, B-R-E-N-T, G-E-E. You can find him on Spotify as well, same place. Or on Instagram at Brent Gee Music. Now, a couple things to mention. If you do like listening to tracks at the beginning of an episode and you're interested in having your music shown out at the beginning of an episode, simply just write me. So chasingcreativitypodcast at email or at gmail.com or at chasing.creativity.podcast on Instagram. Just write me there. I'd love to chat with you and share out your music at the beginning of an episode. Now, getting into today's episode, I mentioned it is on microdosing of psychedelic drugs. Mostly, we talk about microdosing of psilocybin and acid. And I know this is a controversial topic. It's definitely, controversial, I guess is the best way to put it. But this stuff fascinates me. And I was really just excited for Johann to reach out to me. And we started speaking over Instagram. And for him to open up about these methods of kind of getting into a creative space for his music, and also the effects that he's found through this process on all of the different aspects of his life is just fascinating. So we talk about in today's episode. Again, I know it's a bit of a controversial topic, but just to mention this as we go into this episode, this isn't something that I myself am saying, go out and try tomorrow. I think that these chemicals, these compounds can be used, I think, potentially in a useful manner, but also in the same sense, they can be detrimental. So all of this, I really just look as a fascinating topic to address, and I'm by no means saying go out and change your life tomorrow. Regardless, I just thought this was an awesome episode. So that being said, we're going to jump in here shortly. I'm going to keep this one very short. A couple things coming up for future episodes. Rylan Taggart, who has released on This Never Happened, he just had a couple tracks come out on Root to Branch Volume 3. He will be on next week's episode, and we have really, really cool things planned for 2019, January of 2019, and a couple months to come. So things are growing, and really excited about that. So look for that next episode. As we jump into this episode, I will say that we're going to show out one of Johann's songs before we transition into the episode. That song is titled We Are the Brave. So look for that. It's a beautiful track. And as we get into the episode, we talk a lot about future tracks and what's to come with Johann's music. So there's a lot to look forward to. Now, last couple things before we jump right in. If you are enjoying these episodes, I always say this, but really, truly, make sure to rate and review. It makes a huge difference for the growth of this podcast. I don't want to get too, I don't know what to say, spammy and like and follow kind of thing. But really, truly, if you're enjoying these episodes, it makes a big difference. And for 2019, I want to see this thing grow. And I've just been absolutely just blown away by how this thing has started. So that's all attributed to all you listening and everyone who's been willing to jump on the podcast and have these conversations. So, anyways, thank you. And that's it. I'll quit rambling here. So we're going to jump right into the episode. Again, thank you to Johann. Thank you to Brent Gee for sharing out his music at the beginning of this episode. And we're going to jump right in. Hope you love it and speak with you all again soon.
Together in a higher state, we are the night, we are the night, we are the brave. Together in a higher state, we are the night, we are the night, we are the brave.
Johann Stone, how's it going, man? Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, man. It sounds so interesting what you guys are doing. We were talking about this earlier.
Yeah, no, I'm really stoked. I appreciate that, and this one in particular, I think is going to be. They're all so cool, but this one is going to be awesome because just to tie the listeners in here a little bit, we were speaking over Instagram after the Des episode came out, and you mentioned that you have some very interesting ways of getting into a creative space. So I'll mention two here. We'll get into them, and I want to kind of dig into how you got started in music and everything, but those being psychedelics, so microdosing psychedelics and Wim Hof breathing method. So that was just the coolest thing to me. So I'm so excited for this.
Thanks for just batting it out. Because I don't know how to segue into that kind of thing, so it's very good that you just took control of it. I've been doing this for about half a year, I think.
Okay.
So I'm by no means an expert. I don't have any political agenda. I don't have any scientific agenda. I mean, I'm not a medical expert. Just to say this so that people don't assume that I'm talking about stuff that I have any expertise on. So other than that, I'm neither promoting it nor what's the other word?
Yeah, what is the other word? No, but I totally, I want to voice the same thing that anyone out there. I mean, we're by no means saying, hey, go try this tomorrow, but this is very interesting.
But it is my story of the experience.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So before we jump into all of that, I mean, that's going to be, I'm stoked. I'm stoked. But so let's jump back to kind of how you started in music.
Yeah.
So I was reading a bit of your bio, and as you mentioned, the kind of techniques into getting into that creative state are a bit new, but you've been making music for a long time. So where did all this kind of start?
Oh, let's see. If we're gonna go way back, it's like my father was very musical. He was always strumming his guitar. He was always introducing me to his favorite music, which kind of got me into like this melodical thinking more than just appreciation. It was like it was more of a melodic thinking, and I think the production and the musical stuff, both the drums and the music production, has been like like a notebook for my melodical thinking on a daily basis. I started off like in rock and roll. I hated dance music to begin with, like, with a passion, because it was I was part of a group like rock and roll metal kind of guys, and we passionately hated dance music together as like a coalition against this disturbing and disgusting music that was electronic dance music. And I was playing drums in a Pantera cover band. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Pantera.
Oh, I know. Yeah, totally.
Okay. So it was like every day, so to speak, we went into the studio, and I actually learned playing drums from a very talented drummer. He's a drummer for a band from Iceland, one of the more obscure big bands in Iceland. It's called Mesoforte.
Okay.
And it's like a jazz fusion band, and it has one of the most iconic songs that no one knows the name of in the world. It's like this commercial under a backdrop kind of song. If you hear it, you'll know it, but it's like nobody knows the name. It's the same with a lot of songs, actually. So I felt like my artistical outlet was going to be the drums forever, because and I feel like a lot of the producers I've met have been like addicted to this beat part of the process, or like the producer, because a lot of producers I know are actually come from the drumming part of things, from music to begin with. But I always wanted to do more of the, like, this melodical structure, like, and I wanted to control and build these super, like, expansive landscapes of these sounds that got my goosebumps rising, right?
Yeah, right.
And I never felt I could do that on the drums, because they're so, like, they are the backbone of the dance music, for example. But I feel like the melodies are what really brings music to life for me.
Yeah, so that's interesting, because you had this kind of background in drumming and playing in this cover band for Pantera, and so you mentioned, you wanted to kind of expand into learning more of that melodic sound. So when you then transitioned into electronic music, which must have been a crazy change, right? Because you were like, no electronic music at all. Had you had any experience with writing the melody maybe in that original band, or was it all kind of brand new when you transitioned into writing progressive, or I guess it was hardstyle, and then which transitioned into trance?
Yeah, it was definitely like very new to me, and it was just, I never had any I don't know scores. I've never played any instruments that you have to know notes. I don't know how scores work. I don't know how. So it was all just, I was kind of like, there's a term out there called keyboard warriors, or like, which is a synonym of producers who have no musical background, and they learn everything from the get-go. So I'm basically one of those guys. But somewhere along the way, I kind of got the gist of creating something catchy and something, or at least in my opinion, something that makes me like appreciate music more. Like I never make, or like I never release anything that I don't appreciate myself.
Yeah. I think that's so important. I mean, I was just having, last episode, which is unreleased at this time, but I was speaking with Ryland Taggart, and I mean, I think that's such a common thing, but he voiced the same thing as when you find yourself releasing music that you've kind of steered off a path and you're trying to maybe fit it to a certain genre, to a certain label or something like that, it loses the magic. I mean, there's something really beautiful about writing something that totally clicks with what you like and you just love what you just put out, and that's really the music, or the magic rather, behind producing.
For me, that you nailed that point definitely, because I've had experiences with these, but I feel it's more like my evolution, because I'm every promoter's nightmare, for example, because I've been all over the spectrum of dance music, or like the more melodic dance music, at least. I've done hardstyle, like you mentioned. I moved from this metal band. This kind of ties into the story. I moved from this metal band, and I started listening to Pendulum, the drum and bass band from Australia, and they were kind of like a good segue from metal into electronic music, because it's pretty. It's pretty like drum and bass is obviously more faster and more. It has some. It shares a lot of elements with metal in a way, and especially Pendulum.
Oh yeah, a lot, like very forward with the drums, with the percussion. Yeah.
So I went. I went from. I started listening to drum and bass, and I tried to. I obviously messed around with making it, but it never clicked with me. So I started making what can only be described as like terrible sounding hardstyle, but it had like the melodic elements, but it was so underproduced. I found a lot of this online a while ago, and it's trash, but it's like, it's good trash though. It's like, if I'm ever out of ideas, I could go there, maybe pick up a few ideas and freshen them up from their grave, so to speak.
Well, and that's how you learn, that I mean, that's also come up so many times, is there's that formative time, just learning how to even make music. It's such a challenge because, you're working in a DAW, you have to do the drums, you have to do the mids, the highs, everything. You have to learn how to mix, have to learn how to master. I mean, there's so many different elements that, I mean, I think across the board, when someone goes back and listens to those first tracks they have out there, it's tough,
Yeah, it's like humble beginnings, right? It's like,
right.
You can't judge the person that made this, because that person turned out to be you in the end, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It was that stepping stone. It's where you started, and that what led to today. And no one can go from zero to, where you want to be 3 or 5 or 6 or 10 years in the future. I mean, you have to go through all those stages.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So from the hardstyle, I kind of there was a middle period where I was into there's like a fringe group between the hardstyle and the hard, or like the trance scene, which is like hard dance, and it's very fringy. It's very, there are not a lot of known producers. There's and I was even more fringy because there's hard dance, and I was kind of in like the trancier part of the hard dance. So I was releasing music that didn't really get a lot of plays. It didn't get a lot of attention until I started like moving. You know what tech trance is? It's like it's a kind of a mixture between techno and trance music. So if you know Sander Van Doorn,
okay,
he used to do stuff like that back in like 2007, and that was his breakthrough sound. But he kind of moved into the more commercial stuff. But he's kind of revitalizing it today. I was kind of in a harder version of that, and then I moved to more of the tech trance sound, and then I broke through to Armada with a track on A State of Trance, which I produced with a friend of mine from Holland.
Yeah.
And it got played in by Armin. So it was kind of 0 to 100 for me. It was
right.
There was so little middle ground, like struggling with getting releases, struggling with this and that. But I kind of it was struggling with a few releases in a different genre, and then I made one track in the more trancier sound, and it instantly got released on one of the biggest trance music labels in the world.
Right.
Which,
that's beautiful. Yeah.
Which in hindsight kind of I didn't adapt into the mentality and all of the quirks of releasing music and all these rules, unwritten rules and rules that of conduct that you have to pick up. So for me it was happening too fast, and a lot of stuff got I didn't pick up a lot of stuff that I did later on that I would have liked to have picked up more naturally, on natural pace, kind of.
That's interesting, because you almost were like thrown right in. You just had this track that just clicked, and then for that reason that just propelled you into this world you really didn't know. And I mean, would you say at that stage that once you found that sound, right, you kind of transitioned from like the harder style into a more trance forward track? Did that click more easily for you? Did you feel like you found something that was more kind of I don't want to say easier to write, but it was just fit better to your personal skills or talents to write that genre of music?
It's an interesting because this segues also into the microdosing stuff, because it's interesting because I only realized today that I was doing this too fast, and it's only today that I'm really truly transitioning into this more melodic sound, because this track was very like, it was it was like a one-hit wonder for me, kind of, in the sense that I just released that track and then I kept on doing the stuff I was releasing before, kind of oblivious to the fact that if I were to capitalize on making more similar stuff to this, I could actually make a name for myself. I was, like I said, I'm every promoter's and every manager's worst nightmare, because I can't stick to things until now.
Do you find that you get I don't want to say bored, but just maybe like excited with different changing genres and changing different ideas and looking into other areas? Is that kind of central to how you enjoy making music?
It has been, but now there's like, I've never felt the way I do right now, because I've always been kind of following trends, because I was making this more progressive trance sound that was pretty popular when I released this track on A State of Trance. But then the uplifting trance bug bit the nation. Oh yeah. And I instantly just jumped on that bandwagon. So and I jumped on a few bandwagons after that, like super dark, psytrance, super, like all these bandwagons. I've been like, it's almost, I always felt like a leaf in the wind, just blowing from one genre to the other. Yeah. But I took a year just meditating, kind of, my true my inner self, so to speak. Very cliche sounding, but no, it really is. But I kind of found what I was looking for, in the sense that I've always, all through these years of making music and following these trends, I've always had my personal preference of music to listen to, regardless of what I'm making at the moment. And I kind of said to myself, okay, if I'm gonna really truly be like echo what's happening in my head and in my in my head, really, because I don't know if there is a soul or if there's a heart that, like, but in my being, very being, like something that is echoing from there,
right?
That I might as well do the music that I enjoy the most, which is like this. Dessa is one of the guys that really is doing very well in this particular sound, this more melodic driven, laid back, like the drop isn't the biggest part of the track. It's
right.
The whole track is the image that you're painting.
Yeah.
So it's not just a one-off hit, like a shot of heroin, so to speak. It's more it's a process. And I think one of the guys who's my biggest inspiration, and has always been, even though I've been jumping around these bandwagons, it's like Eric Prince.
Oh yeah.
And
I don't mean to jump in, but I actually, so for New Year's, he's going to be here in my hometown. So it's funny you mentioned that, because that's the only person that I'm just super excited to see, and I've never seen him before.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, just
no worries, man.
We're right on the same brainwave there. He's amazing.
He is. There's like, and I feel like he's bred so many other good producers as well, like Dessa. I think Dessa is definitely a byproduct, so to speak. No offense, Dessa, if you're listening, but he kind of paved the way for a more of a calmer, like less like in your face. It's still clubby, still danceable, and still euphoric, you know.
Right.
Because there's like Grum, there's Fair Play, there's lots of guys on Anjuna, lots of guys on Armada as well. But I feel like he's kind of like the godfather of this. Yeah. And it's there's so hard to find music that is consistently good. But I think I listened to every single track that he has on Spotify, and I couldn't pick one and say this is the worst track.
Right.
Because it's like there's every single one of this track is a journey in a way. They are like, my personal preference says it's like they are not, some of them don't touch me in the same way as other do, but you can understand that there's actually a story behind a lot of it, or like every single one of them. And I feel like this is so lost in a lot of music today. It's like, especially this, saccharine dance music that has been hit. Yeah. You go ahead. Sorry.
No. I totally agree. I mean, I think that there are tracks out there and there are producers out there that, you're right, can just totally bring you on a journey. I mean, it's so emotionally driven, and I mean, I don't know if it's like a bias on my part, but when I am sitting there listening to some of those tracks, I mean, I just feel the work and intention and emotion kind of flooded in that song, versus some of the commercialized EDM music that's out today. I mean, not to mention any particular name, but some out there, you know, at the top of the charts, right? It can become commercialized, and it's formulaic, and it's right. So I love that, as you mentioned, those artists are still so I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm glad that there's still a space for that and people enjoy that because it's so important. And I mean, of course, um, it you would hate to see it go completely the other direction because I think here, at least in the States, with electronic music, it in the top of the top, it's gotten commercialized, but there's still those amazing artists still playing and still making music, and there's still people going to those shows, of course.
Yeah, definitely, and I think the what's it called, the EDM explosion in America that has been going on for about a few years now.
Oh yeah.
I think actually did good for all of the genres. There was a like an elevation of everyone because the American market opened wide up for everyone.
Oh yeah.
So there is good from it as well, but I agree. It's like a lot of the top charting stuff is very formulaic, but hey, people like it, so
right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And you're right. I think that's a good way to look at it is that it's brought everything up. It's opened these doors. So maybe that's what someone is introduced to first, but then they go on a journey and they find Prids or Dead Mouse or, someone that just totally, on my opinion, produces at just a different level. And then, yeah, you're right. It opens the door for all of that.
Exactly. And I feel like these more soulful or like elevating stuff more than just fist pumping. I think it's so rare, but it's at the same time it's so good that it's rare because you really feel like you found some treasure when you find a track that really puts you in a elevated mood. And I think when you and this I'll just segue this into the microdosing stuff because that's obviously the most important topic we have because I feel like it has touched me in such a profound way in this aspect, for example. Because I was writing music, I was following my bandwagons, and then I took a year to just hypothesize on how to find my sound and I feel like there was a period where I was trying out different stuff. I was meditating, I was doing this and that, and then I stumbled onto an article or like a podcast. It was a podcast by Joe Rogan.
Oh yeah,
where he had this guy called Paul Stamets.
Oh yeah. I keep going. I think I know the one you're speaking of, though.
Yeah, he had like this mushroom hat on, made from a mushroom. Yeah, and he was talking about his experience because I had some former experience with psychedelics, but it was in a different kind of a way. But he was talking about how profound this experience was to him and how much it opened his mind up. But he was talking about tripping, like full-on tripping stuff. And then Joe Rogan was talking about microdosing, and I kind of started studying in my own. I went to a bunch of Reddits. I went to all these videos on the substances themselves and the different kind of ways to apply them to your life. And I haven't been into the tripping stuff yet. I might do one day, but I think this is very good for now, the microdosing stuff. And because it in this process of myself finding out about what really crept inside me musically wise, I stumbled upon this and I was like, okay, I'll give this a shot. I'll give it a shot and see if this really opens the door for me. And lo and behold, it flung me into a new dimension of, and there like drugs drugs are obviously a controversial topic. And I feel like a lot of these drugs are an escape, so to speak, right? So alcohol, cannabis, these for me in the past were escape from problems, from reality, or so on. I feel like this one is an exact opposite of that. Like the microdoses is they if you have any unresolved issues or unresolved problems, they'll fling them right in your face, and you have to kind of deal with it in your head at least, and then you can and I feel like this like self-searching stuff, it kind of just blew away a lot of dust that had settled on my view of myself, because I kind of saw in the core, like I'm speaking obviously in analogies, but I kind of found that this, like I've always been into melodies, but I've always been like hesitant on doing this like bigger sound, like less is more kind of a feel, where a few elements really just speak everything that it. If you listen to my older projects, everything is so over cluttered with elements. Everything is so like patched up almost, just with some random stuff that I didn't really feel. There's something missing, so I'll just patch it with some Vengeance loops or whatever. But I feel like when you go into these soul searching, however you do it, and the Wim Hof also comes into this part because it really helps with meditation. When you start searching your soul or searching in your head, you'll find some very interesting answers, and and these answers you can apply not only to your music, but from just so happens that music is my ultimate passion in life. So obviously it's going to affect that in a very, very specific way. But I feel like it's also helped me realize a lot of other things in my life. And I can apply, and there's a lot of things I can apply from learning how to make music into real life. And I'll get into that later on. So do you have any questions on this explosion?
Yeah, well, yeah, no. I mean, it's so interesting, and I myself, I've never, so I've done psychedelics once, right? But it was when I was much younger, and it was a really profound experience. But I think I might have been too young to use it as like a tool, and it was psilocybin as well. But learning or hearing about this and from yourself and from other people, I mean, this has been really echoed by researchers and by other people, as you mentioned, who have worked with this. I see that it can have these profound effects. And there's one thing that you mentioned I think is really important, as how you're addressing it, right? Because say with alcohol or marijuana, right? I think the intention behind those is so critical, because if it is used, or let's just take, cannabis, for example, it can be used, I think, as such a tool if everything else is kind of if you're approaching it in the right manner, and everything is kind of in line, and you're using it to better yourself, but at the same point it can be escapist, so it's so interesting to see how these can be utilized, right? Because you really have to be conscious of what you're doing in the moment, how you're using them, and if it's bettering yourself or if it's acting as like this escape. And I just think it's amazing that your experience so far with these allowed you to see better about yourself, right? To get a sense of where it brought problems that might be sitting in your subconscious, or thoughts that are sitting in your subconscious, and threw them into the forefront. And you have to deal with them, Yeah, that's just so cool. So then with these experiences, it's for the music, it's led you more into kind of having this understanding of bringing in like less elements into a track, and seeing your, maybe you might agree with this, it's allowed you to maybe view your tracks not from yourself, but kind of as like an observer, and really to be like maybe more objective about what you're
Definitely.
putting there. Yeah, cool.
So it's kind of like, also because it's a lot of my music was so cluttered,
Mm.
and I felt like my mind was also very cluttered at these moments.
Oh
So
yeah.
so this kind of, it kind of just paved a lot of ways in my mind. So it paved a lot of the tracks as well,
Yeah.
in a very weird like sense. But yeah, you were mentioning. I was just talking about my own personal experience of these drugs, the former drugs. I don't drink or use cannabis at all, and I
Right.
haven't done so in 8 years now.
Mm.
So for me, they were an escape. A lot of people can use them for their betterment or for more spiritual experiences.
Mm.
But for my personal usage, it was an escape for me.
Yeah.
But I agree. It's like, and it's always, this is echoed so many times around psychedelics, the setting part
Yeah.
about it. It doesn't apply that much with microdosing because you're obviously just in your day-to-day life, just,
Mm.
and it doesn't affect you. It can affect you like in the beginning, like in a weird way, but it doesn't really. You're like, if anything, you're more sober than when you're off it, kind of, in a
Oh
weird
yeah.
way. In a weird way.
Oh, that's so cool. You're more kind of maybe like focused or in tune a
Yeah.
little bit. It like heightens your senses a bit, rather than you feel like you're high or something like that.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
definitely that in that sense of I'd rather, yeah, I'd say it sobers you up beyond your sobriety. It's like
yeah.
it's like you reach it's a very weird thing to try to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it, because it's like, I often try to make this analogies because I've been on, I do have ADHD, for example, and I've been on these amphetamine derivatives like Ritalin, and it's like the fastest way from point A to point B. Like Ritalin helps you from A to B very efficiently. But what this does, it adds C, D, E, F, G.
Oh yeah.
So you can just, okay, there are all these other aspects that I haven't seen before and I haven't utilized. So, and what it also does, and I felt like was one of the more how would you say it? The more apparent changes in my productions is that it helped me unlearn a lot of bad habits I had in the production. Like, let's say I open up a project and like my muscle memory would do a lot of things that I later learned that weren't that efficient, and they weren't that ideal for a lot of things. And I kind of just was stuck in this loop of doing these things, like EQing too heavily, drastically, like a lot of things that kind of like these bad habits I picked up along the way. And it was so easy to unravel these ingrained habits when I was in the process of microdosing while I was working on the music. So it's so weird because it really resonates with the new studies that have been coming out about PTSD and about resetting the fear response in the brain. So I think it's very weird to be able to experienced firsthand some of the things that are like being researched at the moment. So I feel very privileged to have stepped in the direction of trying this at least.
Yeah, that is so. Oh man, this is just so cool because you're right. There's a lot of research right now, and I just recently read that here in the States, in Oregon, they're looking to legalize psilocybin recreationally, which is, that would be the first ever. But aside from that, there are organizations here in the States that are looking to just do research on psychedelics, psilocybin being one. And that's the application oftentimes is like PTSD, soldiers, vets here in the States who come back from war, they found profound effects where some of these sessions where they use a psychedelic in conjunction with, say, therapy for X amount of times, a lot of those, a lot of the roadblocks that maybe someone couldn't get past with just therapy are alleviated now. And they're finding that this is like, yeah, it's this great tool to add onto the side. And that's so amazing that you mentioned that you can even see in yourself that some of these maybe bad habits, you're like more aware of them. You see them there almost as like an observer, and you can like get those out of the way right away. You're like in this heightened state, almost like a more sober state, and you can see what you're doing.
It's so funny that you say like an observer, because I haven't really visualized it in that way, but you're so true that I felt like I could remove myself from myself in a weird way, that I could observe my day-to-day life, or my quirks and my bad habits, for example, and I could analyze them from a neutral, and I wasn't so involved with all of it. So it's very funny that you should mention it, because I haven't had this vision of it before, but it's spot on.
Cool. Yeah. It reminds me of meditation, so with meditation, the idea is that you are just observing the thoughts come in, but you're trying to be like this outside observer, seeing the thoughts and letting them pass.
Yeah.
So these psychedelics and psilocybin might be this kind of enhancing tool that kind of shoots you right there, where you're more able to just see the thoughts and observe the thoughts. You're kind of, I don't know. It's really like, cool.
It's almost like if meditation is like this old phone that you have to you have to be at home and you have to dial it in. This kind of like the microdosing is kind of like having this phone with you, like a smartphone, wherever you go, because it is kind of a meditative state, but you can utilize it in a different way and in a weird way, like I was trying to explain before, because it's so weird to pick up on these things that because most of us don't notice our patterns and our quirks and our shortcomings, because we're so involved with being ourselves that we kind of can't remove ourselves from, obviously you can't remove yourself from yourself, but you can't really remove yourself either from your conduct in an everyday life, where you're just playing out your life, basically.
Right.
So you get to step back and observe for a little bit and see what things maybe you could improve, and I think that it's so different from the rest of these drugs. For my personal usage, it's so different from the rest of these drugs, where I've been always trying to escape all these thoughts, like what's really brewing underneath, but after being sober for this long of all these alcohol, all these other drugs, I kind of feel like this exactly sobers me up beyond that. So it's a very, very interesting thing to but like I said, there's not a lot of research around it, so this is only coming from a personal experience.
Right. Well, it's so funny too, because here, as you mentioned, like this versus other drugs, it's amazing that there are things that are legal, like alcohol and cigarettes here in the States, right? And And also, we have a horrible issue right now with prescription drugs as an epidemic, where
Yeah.
doctors will
Opiates.
prescribe
Yeah.
doctors will prescribe the opiates, and they'll be on such a high number of these pills a day after 3 months after, say, back surgery or something, right?
Yeah.
It's prescribed that there, of course, that patient is going to be addicted, and then a lot of people are dying. A lot of people are buying them illegally after that. I mean, it's a crisis. And then there are things like this, which the research, even though it is tough to research some of these psychedelics because they are Schedule 1 here in the United States,
Yeah.
they are being researched, and even in different countries, it's showing these positive benefits. It's really incredible. And I think this does become, we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast, before we started recording, but it does become a political conversation, because at least here, there are pharmaceutical lobbyists that want to have certain drugs legal,
Yeah.
because you can't grow them in your backyard, and other drugs illegal because you can grow them in your backyard, like, say, marijuana or
Exactly.
psychedelics,
They
And
want you
so it's-
dependent on the system, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And there's a lot of money, a lot of money for them to do that. And it's incredible. I mean, I'm really happy that over the last maybe 5 years, it's changed here, maybe 5-10 years here in the States, it's changed, where states are legalizing marijuana
Mhm.
medicinally or recreationally. And now, as I mentioned, Washington or Oregon is looking to legalize psilocybin recreationally, which would be
Yeah.
insane. I mean, that'd be the first ever. So
Yeah.
it's great that there's this, the tide is turning where these things are being more accepted and more and researched, because I just see I see incredible benefits. There's no one like yourself or interviews I've listened to where people say, there's horrible negative side effects. And of course, if I think it's misused, potentially, yes, but I think there's so much upside that it at least needs to be researched.
Exactly. And of course there's going to be, because if you have like underlying schizophrenia, this is not a good idea. And if you're on SSRI drugs, like these depression
Antidepressants.
antidepressants, it does affect it in some ways, but I haven't researched it enough to say exactly what it does. But definitely, and a lot of these things are being misrepresented and being misdiagnosed.
Yep.
Because there's no data, because it's illegal.
Right.
So when things are illegal, they're not researched. There's no data on how much there's used of it. For example, like we have complete records of the alcohol consumption, for example, here in Iceland, because it's legal, and we know how many people buy how many bottles of vodka or whatever. Whereas because all the other drugs, or most of the other drugs, are illegal, there's no data on how much of it's used. There's no data on how many of people die, like, exactly from this kind of drug, because obviously there is some data when you are transferred to a hospital, you actually die. But I mean, or dying is a better term, I guess, from these prescription medicine, from the opiates, like fentanyl.
Oh yeah.
Like, there's a fentanyl epidemic here in Iceland, and there's like, I've been in 3 funerals in the last year of people or doing cocaine laced with it, or like, it's so backwards, I think, all of these things.
I agree. And that's what's happening here too, is people get addicted to a prescription drug and they think they're taking I think it's like oxy, but it's actually pressed fentanyl, and fentanyl being so much more potent than that's it. It's horrible. And it's so incredible that these things, it's like, why? So I think fentanyl is 100 times more potent than Oxycontin or something like that. It's like, why? What?
It's like,
what is the use? What? It is. It's totally backwards. And I
Hmm.
know people that have gone through surgery and said, I'm not going to use any prescription drugs. I'm just going to, smoke cannabis. And they get through it and it's like, well, it doesn't have any it has behavioral addiction effects, right?
Yeah,
Cannabis you can be behaviorally addicted to, but it doesn't have a chemical addiction component. So it's so, as you mentioned, backwards that some of these things shouldn't be like a first, used first, let's say, and
yeah,
then, use some of those other drugs very carefully if needed. But yeah, we have the same thing here.
hmm
It's horrible. And I think that's why these types of conversations are so important because I think our generation, I saw you're born 1990, I'm 89. So
yeah,
we're in this age group where people that are becoming sadly we're like adults now
yeah.
but we're more open to the fact and we can see how fucked up things are in our society, and I think we're going to be that generation that can open the conversation for these other things and really expose some of the bullshit going on.
For sure, for sure. And there's a guy, Sam Harris.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He did a very interesting topic on this. He was talking in his, I think it was just like only him talking, but most of his podcast is him and somebody else. But he was talking about the distinction between, because psychedelics and these and other drugs, because of this fact that you can there is a deeper there are deeper layers than just using them recreationally. Obviously there is for a lot of other drugs, but I think especially LSD and psilocybin. And by the way, I've been trying out both with some with series of pauses in between just to clean my. And I haven't done it in a month now, so just to give you a perspective of how I conduct this, or like how I pursue these things, because I feel like it's not, like I say, it's not addictive,
Right.
other than being a mood booster, so to speak. But I feel like my general mood is pretty positive on on a daily basis. So I feel like it doesn't affect me in that way. But I feel like even though I've been off the microdosing for a month now, there's so many things left behind in my brain that I can access because of these. And there's actually proof of these things that have already come out of these studies that have been conducted recently, is that it kind of builds new bridges in your brain. Like,
oh yeah,
there's like different kind of neuro transmissions that are possible after you block because it blocks some serotonin receptors, I think, or replaces the serotonin that are supposed to go into these receptors, and they are forced to go into other directions. And there's an interesting picture online if you search brain on mushrooms, and it shows like 20 30 maybe kinds of neurotransmissions in your brain, and then there's another, like a circle next to it. Yeah, it kind of shows you how, and if you get to tap into this mode of being for only like an underlying, because the microdosing is kind of like it never goes into hallucinations. It never goes into like feeling of bewilderment or feeling of strangeness, so to speak. So you're kind of just you're dipping your toe into this mode of being where all these receptors and all these transmissions are possible. And I felt this so strongly when I've been doing this, and especially concerning the music, but also I feel like there's a slight difference, in my opinion. This is only my opinion, between the two, between the LSD and the psilocybin. I feel like the psilocybin is more of a introverted kind of experience. You get to, like I said, I was delving into my psyche, trying to find like my musical gold mine within myself, so to speak. Right. Where that, I felt like that helped a lot with that, like finding myself. Whereas the LSD was kind of like extroverted and kind of like energetic, and it's almost like, it's like idea work can come from from my perspective, ideas can benefit from the psilocybin, whereas in the actual production and the marketing and the talking to people, trying to market yourself, like this is all for my experience more in line with the LSD, because it's so weird, because I feel like if I were a character in a video game, I feel like I've had these new attributes of stats added to me.
Yeah. Like that, that's so cool. And it's cool that you kind of see the differences, as you mentioned, like between psilocybin and LSD. And while you were mentioning that, I pulled up that picture, and I think people should look at that. If, brain on mushrooms, it is really incredible, because it shows like it's a circle with those connections. And it reminded me, as you're speaking earlier, about Paul Stamets on Joe Rogan, and he had just this incredible story. I'm sure you remember it, where he had to stutter as a child.
Yeah.
And he couldn't get rid of it, and he took this heroic amount of psilocybin and climbed up this tree, and he was sitting there and he was having this great time, and then the storm comes, and he realizes he's too, now this is of course not microdosing, he's on like he's
macrodosing,
he's paralyzed, right? Macrodosing.
Yeah.
But he had this stutter, and once he was in this storm and he was on this insane amount of psilocybin, and he told himself like he's going to stop this, it's going to change. He it was gone after that.
He basically rewired his brain in a sense.
Right. And now he said that if it will be very, very almost non-existent when that stutter comes, but certain times, but it's like night and day in comparison to how it was before this experience. I mean, that stuff is just so incredible. It's so cool, and it's just so frustrating that it hasn't been more researched, but it's so cool that we can talk about this now, and that it's opening the door, and just hearing this kind of first person account of what you've experienced is amazing.
Yeah, it could potentially have some implications, but I'm kind of like, I've already talked to a few people about this, so I kind of feel like, why not just be the person who actually is open about talking about this,
Yeah. Well, and I think that how you mention that is so profound, because it's the same with music. It's that decision I think every producer will make, where it's, I'm just going to write the stuff I want to make. And you're saying the same thing. I'm just going to be me and talk about this thing that's so critical to me. And I firmly believe that being honest like that and doing exactly what it is that is you, it will benefit you rather than hinder you in the future. People will get to know you as this musician, but also this proponent for microdosing psychedelics, and it will kind of open these different doors. And I think that in the long run, just being true to yourself like that will greatly benefit you, rather than keeping it kind of quiet and hidden and not really allowing people to learn about these different aspects of yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's like, how much of you are you going to be,
Right.
Are you going to be this shallow or like hollow shell of yourself, or like shallow is a good word as well, because or are you going to delve into every aspect there you could potentially be, and see what fits and see what you can. And I think that's another point. It's like you can kind of you can see yourself from an observer's perspective, like you said. But the thing is, you can just close your eyes to it as well. But it only shows you these things. It doesn't force you to take any actions, but it shows you how fucked up some of these things are, because there's some learned habits that you've been programming yourself, and other people have programmed you to do or to think, and you kind of you're given a second chance just to look at it from a neutral perspective.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that that's an important point to mention, that it just shows you, and then you get to decide what you want to do with it. And I think can be frightening for a lot of people and make people maybe be a little hesitant to try some of these things, because you don't know. A lot of times people go through their day to day and are kind of happy with not addressing some of the deeper things. But I just, having this conversation with you, I see that it's so important.
Yeah, I think I may not have learned as like, and to segue into the Wim Hof stuff there's another, because I think to a lot of people, bad trips are the things that put people off about psychedelics and about trying them, and I feel like these things are not like to be trifled with, so to speak, because it's not just toys or these. I take this very seriously.
Well, and I think that does open up kind of the door for, and I did want to speak about this, about the Wim Hof breathing, because that is, I think, a way. Well, that's totally amazing to me, because I'll tell you what I know so far. I don't know a whole lot about him, but there's a documentary I watched where, with his breathing exercises, he could sit in freezing water. It was like an ice bath, and they monitored his body temperature and his breathing, and it was as if he wasn't in that water, all based on how he proclaims that based on his meditative and breathing exercises, you can physiologically change how your body is regulating hormones and different reactions to your environment.
It's unbelievable how much he can control by just these few things. That it's like cold exposure, meditation, and breathing. Yeah. And the breathing part is, for me, is the most important part, because I always take cold showers just to, but I haven't done these extremities that some of the people who are full on into it do. But I try to do the breathing every single day, and what it really does, it kind of toughens your mind to be able to handle things that, like, for example, psychedelics can introduce you to, in a way that just because we're talking about it, but it also it kind of it hardens your mind. You don't get like a leaf in the wind, like I was talking about earlier, in emotions. And when you meditate and you truly like focus your energy into like solving your problems or finding solutions to them, it's almost like exercise, right? It's like the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the more you search introvertedly. Is that a word?
I think so. Yeah. Introvert. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
Totally. Probably. Yeah.
The more you search introvertedly, the better you get at it. And then when for example, when I was going to the microdosing, I already had all these meditative tendencies and all these are like toughened up or like exercised. Like if we call it a muscle, I'd already been in the gym for a while, so this was just an addition to that, and it kind of, they were never like, because a lot of people go into this half-heartedly, like, and they don't give a second thought about it. They just, oh, I'll try it at a friend's party or whatever.
Right.
And what happens is they're like blasted into another dimension where they don't make sense of anything, and they'll have a shitty time because they'll get stuck in some thought loops of disgusting things.
Right. It's like you haven't prepared at all, and then you just jump into running in a marathon. You know, you're going to be throwing up, you're going to pass out, you're going to feel horrible. It's like easing into that, gaining kind of the muscle as you mentioned. And it's cool that you mentioned that that's a technique to almost kind of prepare for these things, because I think anyone going into, say, like microdosing or something like that would have a lot of anxiety early on. It would be a new experience. You know, you don't know what's going to happen. So having that background where you say, okay, you feel confident in some, maybe you're going to feel more confident in some of those more challenging experiences, then you have the muscle and you can kind of navigate that better.
Exactly, because it's the practice is everywhere, right? Because whatever you do, like, the more you do it, the better you get at it, and this is not exempt of that rule, because a lot of people just look at this as, it's drugs, it's like there's no benefits from it, but you can channel this into being like one of the most important things to happen to you if you so choose, because there is potential for like in my case, to just transform your creative mind, because this is obviously my creativity that we're talking about here. It can just open you up like a book, and you can read whatever you want, and you can change the text. That's my experience from it. And to be able to do this at a later stage in life, where you can kind of mess with the programming of your head, I think it's very interesting, to say the least, and it's very exciting for me, because I've already felt so much of the benefits from it. So
yeah. And one thing you mentioned there is someone might just shrug it off as, oh, it's drugs, whatever, but that's such a shallow perspective, because people don't realize that our brain is just a soup of chemical reactions, right? And when we take in caffeine, we have coffee in the morning, that's a chemical, right? We're just this complicated organisms of chemical reactions at some point. And then there's the question of, like, is there the soul there or not? But aside from that, right, it's chemical reactions, and this is simply a chemical, right? That's just altering how the functioning works. So it's funny that I think that stance a lot of times is from a person that just doesn't want to go down that road at all. They want to be, I'm me, I'm this person, I'm not, they're missing the whole other side of it, that, really, what are you at a fundamental level? Yeah. It's funny that way. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like cherry picking. Like, this is a chemical we are okay with, and this other thing is like, it's obviously spawn of the devil, and we have to burn some books and whatnot. Like, explaining the 70s in the US, right? Because
well, now my parents' generation, like my friends' parents' generation, cannabis it's just ingrained in them that it's horrible, and it's just so funny to see the change of perspective for this generation, because I remember when I was young and I mean, maybe like 9, 8, 9, 10 years old. So I thought when I'd see maybe like a picture of a marijuana leaf at say like a store in the mall or something, I thought it was just the worst thing in
Yes.
the world, you know? And now it's just, you grow up and it's just so, it can be used incorrectly, but it can be so harmless too. You
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
It's so funny.
It can very much so be used incorrectly, just as well as sugar
Right.
can be used very incorrectly, and every alcohol definitely.
Yeah.
Way more than, I think alcohol kills the most people in the world, except for maybe sugar. I think sugar and alcohol are the worst offenders.
Totally. And sugar is just everywhere, especially, I don't know how it is in Iceland, but in the States, it's insane. I mean, depending on where you live, right, there are certain parts of the country that the diet is horrible. It's just huge sodas and cheeseburgers and everything's just loaded with sugar. And I mean, people are obese, you know, it's killing people.
It's the same thing here. Like I was doing the keto diet recently, like keto, you know, ketosis. Oh, yeah. And it never entered my mind to check for sugar levels in foods before I started. Right. And it just boggled my mind how much sugar there is in everything.
Oh yeah, it's insane. It's insane.
Yeah. It is insane because there's sugar in things that you would never believe there was sugar in. Like they'll add it into everything, and it's more addictive than cocaine.
Right.
It is.
Oh yeah, they'll put it in vegetables, you know, if it's like a package, not like a raw vegetable where you buy in the produce section, but if you buy something that's maybe in a microwave container where it's just green beans, there's almost surely sugar in that. It's incredible.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, but it's like if you eat sugar, you're chemically dependent the whole day. The reason I stopped using alcohol was because it started being problematic for me. And the same reason with cannabis, because it was such a good way for me to escape all my problems that I just became behaviorally dependent on it, because it just gave me this relief that I knew I didn't deserve, but I got it anyway. It's like it's like a participation trophy in life, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I haven't heard it phrased that's perfect. It's like you get this moment where your problems don't matter, but it's undeserved.
Yeah. Because you didn't fix your problems, and you didn't go through the process of actually learning from your mistakes. What you did is you just what's it called?
Like pushed them down, you know, pushed them an hour or two, and then they're still there.
Exactly. Yeah. You just took a chemical and it made you feel like you actually did all of those things. Well, you didn't. So that's what it did for me, and that's the reason I've been I haven't touched alcohol or cannabis or any other drugs except for these microdosing in about 8 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like it's just been so powerful and important, the perspective you shared, because, you know, this whole conversation, it's completely apparent that this microdosing is just used as a tool. I mean, you said, okay, you haven't done it in a month. You'll do it on a regimented basis where you're not, like you can see it's so evident right off the bat that it's not something that's just another crutch, right?
Exactly.
It's not. Yeah, it's in its own realm, and man, I think that's so cool. And you know, I know this podcast isn't, you know, it's kind of starting out, right? This is going to be like episode 21, so it's fairly new. But having these conversations, I still feel is like so important. And then for people like Joe Rogan to have that platform and have these conversations too, I just think is super important, because I don't know. This just got me so excited. I'm hyped on all this now, because just hearing your story and talking about just the societal shift is I'm excited to see where this goes. I think that's a good way to put it. Is I think that we're kind of on the precipice of things changing, really, and we're, as I mentioned, we're both around 30, and we're
Mm-hmm.
going to see as we become adults that I think these things are going to be much more adopted. At least I
Definitely,
hope so. Yeah.
definitely. I think without a doubt, because people are gonna want this, and like capitalism is gonna kick in, and it's probably gonna be marketed as
That's
well.
true. Yeah,
But
because yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
uh, there was another thing I picked up on, because
Yeah.
you were saying this is not another crutch as the other ones I was talking about, because I'd love to see someone try to use this as a crutch for their problems, because it's like being slapped in the face with a big like a rotten fish,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that fish is all your problems, right?
Right.
Because you get like, okay, I know these are the things that I hate about myself, as well
Yeah.
as the things I love about myself, and the things I'd like to enrich, and the things I'd love to fix. And these things become so apparent. And I think when you're like really tripping, these things become like, if you're going controlled through it, like you were talking about the psilocybin controlled therapeutic stuff, where PTSD victims are being led through these things that wouldn't be possible, because I kind of look at it like your brain is locked
Yeah.
in all these like reactionary things, and these proactions, and your brain map basically dictates the way you behave on a regular basis. So it's kind of locked, and then you take this compound, and it kind of unlocks it, and you can kind of switch around a few things, or this isn't working for us, let's sever this tie and tie it over here. So
Yeah.
with the PTSD is what it does. It's like these regressive thinking, and these thought loops that PTSD is very known for. They kind of evaporate, because you just severed the connection that you've been going through every single time you go through this thought loop that has been like bringing you depression and anxiety, right?
Yeah, and to that same point as well, I think there's been, well, there's definitely been research. I should maybe have read up a little bit more on it, or whatnot. But I know for like end stage cancer patients, right, where they know that they only have like a month to live. A lot of times they've shown positive benefits from LSD and psilocybin, because they become kind of more at peace, and maybe I don't know this for certain, but my guess is understand more of like a unity with what you really are, being from
Yeah.
the earth, and it's a more easy way to accept a transition like that, so it's
Those two
it's so
things,
cool. Yeah.
these two things, the terminally ill cancer patients,
Mm.
and the what was the other one we were talking about?
PTSD.
Yeah, the PTSD. These are the
Yeah.
two. These are the two most recent studies that have been made around this compound, and they've been
Yeah.
showing extremely positive things happening for these people. The other thing is, like in Denmark, what they're doing is they're using psilocybin to treat alcoholism.
Oh, interesting.
So that's basically another thought loop and a pattern that you get stuck in. It's like
Right.
these alcoholism obviously is like a series of patterns that you it's the same as PTSD in that sense. It's like you have some thought loops you can't get out of. So this kind of like could potentially sever that tie as well. So I think we're on the verge of very interesting things concerning these things.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. And one thing that came to mind after you and I had just spoken for the first time, and we were speaking about this a bit earlier, is right away I searched psilocybin and creativity, and the second thing that comes up is a article from Psychology Today, and I just pulled it up here too, but this researcher, Luisa Projicskova, is a cognitive psychologist studying the effects of microdosing on creativity, and this is out of the Netherlands, I believe. So these things are like right there. We're like right there for them to be studied, and it's so cool. It's so cool, and I hope down the road. I mean, I think this perspective is so awesome and important. I've kind of tried to address this podcast in the same way, where bringing composers on or music producers on to speak about creativity from their perspective, where they're actually doing the music, right? Versus then a researcher in creativity talking about the science behind it.
Exactly.
I would love, I would love to have someone studying just purely the science behind, what you've echoed today. I just think that would be so cool just to see it from both frames of view. And I'm another thing to mention. You had mentioned that this is fairly recent, right? A few months, but I'm really excited to see where this goes into like the next year, how this is gonna, play into new tracks coming and all these different things. Cause I'm certain it's going to have a profound effect. I mean,
it already has. It already has because I kind of felt like a prisoner of my state of mind before. I was like, if I feel like making music, I have to like cancel everything I'm doing, and then I have to jump in front of my computer and okay, I'm in the mood. I have to spew out everything that comes. But now I kind of I have like this on and off switch of inspiration, so to speak. It's like when I'm not doing it, I'm not constantly obsessing about it. Instead, I'm just very controlled about letting the inspiration come when I'm really inspired. Because it used to be like I said, I was a prisoner of my own thoughts and my own loops. It's like if I were in the mood, I'd cancel all my plans and I'm like, okay, I have to sit down and make this track because it's so inspiring. But now I can just jump whenever I have a free time. It gives me so much more freedom because all of a sudden I'm free to do music whenever I want to, because I'm not a slave to inspiration, because I can basically control it in a very, very I don't know how to explain it in words, but it's like almost an on and off switch compared to what it was.
Yeah, it's interesting how you mentioned that, because as just from my own thoughts as you're mentioning this, if you're kind of struck with inspiring moments when you're working on a track and you say, okay, I have to pause everything because this is such a profound moment, I need to capture this. It can maybe be at a psychological level, you're just kind of naturally getting into like a clear headspace, whereas now you have the tools to get in, like how to get into that clear headspace. So that's what
I'm realizing so much about myself just talking about this with you as well. It's so weird. Thank you so much for having me on, man.
Oh, of course. No, these things are just so fascinating to me. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I think that the act of verbalizing things, often for myself, I'll better understand things. Like, so when I was in school and if I was working on, say, like a math problem, I'd go to this tutoring center all the time because I was naturally not good at math. And so I'd be there like every day, and I'd sit and I'd be working on a problem in my own mind, and I wouldn't understand what's going on. And then I'd ask a tutor to come over and help. And when I said it out loud, I was like, well, I'm here. Then it would like click, So some of it is even just verbalizing it. And I know you've had these conversations elsewhere too, but I think that part is like almost another way of just addressing, I don't know, like the subconscious, the conscious, like working out ideas. because I found that for myself, at least it was like really revolutionary. Once I said it, things clicked in a different way.
Mm-hmm. And because when you let it fester in your mind for too long, it kind of loses its meaning because you're not interacting with it. You're not using it as a tool to connect with other people, because that's how we really learn things, is when we utilize the tools. It's not just staying in your head. It's like reading a book, or like reading a cookbook and not doing any of the recipes, right?
Right. Yeah. You might be able to visualize it, but you're not going to have that real experience.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. But yeah, man, I mean, this has just been like for the fucking books. This is just the coolest, man. I loved this. And you know, if down the road, like say 6 months, a year, whatever, I really, really would love to just have another conversation with you, just to talk about what's happened over that span. Because, you know, this is new. You're already seeing these amazing effects from it, and I'm sure it's going to continue that way. And I'd love to do that.
I'd love to do that as well. Just like a report. On how things have been, and maybe just check how the research is going and how things have been put into perspective, good or bad, you know. And there is one thing I'd like to mention, because there totally. Like if I check my Spotify user page, like the artist page, like
where you see the metrics,
where you see the metrics, there's a very clear sign where I started doing that. It's
that's so cool.
It's like there's one. And I think because a lot of it was the remix of the track that I made a track, and then Fatum did a remix of it. It was
I see that. Yeah, we are the brave.
Yes, exactly. And there's a graph just showing exactly how, when I start. It's like, I can always remember when I started microdosing. It's like 1 month before this incredible spike. I don't know. I remember it was around 10,000 views on Spotify, or monthly listeners, and it's probably that again now, because I haven't released a track. There's a big one coming with a music video I sent you earlier, and
cool.
It's pretty hush at the moment, but it's super super cool. So and there's a big remix for that one as well, and just these things about, like, even just the remixer is like me actually getting out of my comfort zone and talking to these people and getting them to remix. It's all these things come together when I'm thinking about this. It's like it made me a better musician in every single aspect of it. It didn't just improve my production skills. It also improved my marketing myself in a way that I'm not just waiting for things to happen, you know?
Right, yeah.
And actually interacting with people and trying to get be the voice for yourself in a way. And it got me a residency here in Iceland as a DJ. So I DJ.
Oh man,
it's like all these things made so easy just with a few like exercises and like tiny doses of these incredible compounds. It's like so weird how easily I could manipulate myself into being the best, or not the best version of myself, but clearly I'm a better version of myself than I was before in this aspect. I don't know if I'm fucking up a lot of other things, but
well, yeah, I mean, I think just the way that you phrase that too, you know, you kind of stop and you're like the best. You're like, no, I'm better, you know, because like I can tell you're just like so cognizant of like how you're thinking. You know, it's like you're not like, okay, I'm perfect now, I'm moving forward. It's like you just know you're better, and you're like, you have more, you're growing, and you're seeing this in a whole different perspective. It's so cool, man. I'm stoked, and yeah, I'd really you know, we were talking before this podcast, and you sent over the music, so I'm stoked to hear it. But it's awesome to, you know, hear you say that you already have big things that are coming here in the beginning of the year into 2019, and yeah, it's just I'm totally confident that I'll like we'll be chatting, and it will just be like more and more things unraveling, like things opening up, and
there's so much things in the pipelines as well. It's like it's almost like overwhelming, and it's kind of like I'm looking at this spectrum of things that I've achieved. Is like, did I really do this? Am I kind of cheating? Am I hacking? Am I using like an aimbot on my life right now?
For your life? Yeah. But I don't know. There's this whole new branch, or there's like I don't want to call it a fad, but like a new way of looking at yourself, where it's like optimization, you know. Like with Wim Hof, he's tied in with On It, you know, and they do the what is it now, the nootropics, right, to get you that edge. And you know, I haven't really dove into that all that much, but you know, just thinking about it now, it's you almost, I think a person can learn about these things and think, oh, well, I'm fine, I don't need to look into that, you know. It's, but you don't realize, because you're in that headspace, that there's so many tools that you could utilize to benefit yourself, you know. Yeah, it's sweet, man. But yeah, I mean, so last thing, I mean, I want to make sure that, you know, we touch on this moving into, you know, 2019's coming, all these things. For everyone listening, where can we point them just to hear your music? Anything in particular? I mean, Spotify, of course, but anywhere else that you'd like to point listeners?
If you're ever in Iceland, come check me out. No, but Spotify, obviously. I'm not pushing any agenda at the moment. Just, there are a lot of remixes I've made. I made a official remix for Armin van Buuren when I was in my uplifting state, and that's kind of obscured on Spotify, and it's more on other mediums. But YouTube, Johann Stone on YouTube, and most of the stuff is put there by the labels themselves. So, but I kind of feel like it gives a false representation of my music, because this is so much my past, and I feel like there's only one song released that really encapsulates the sound that I'm going for right now. So I think it's better maybe just to wait for if you want to hear what I've been talking about. Obviously, you could go to YouTube or Spotify, but I think it's more like, just you wait, guys. And I kind of, it's like there's things coming that I'm very proud of. So.
Hell yeah, man. Well, dude, I am stoked, and I'll continue to, you know, here even into the new year, when you put new things out there, I'll promote it on Instagram and all that stuff. So, I you know, totally just to kind of to keep everyone open to the new stuff, man. I'm really stoked, and I honestly thank you for doing this. It's just been this has been such a cool conversation.
Yes, it has. It's been very enjoyable.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again. Thank you. I don't know how else to express it. This has just been so fucking cool.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad I reached out to you, and I'm glad Dessa was on the show, because otherwise I probably, because I think I saw it on his Instagram. So I checked you guys out. I was like, this is so interesting. This is so cool.
Oh, thanks, man. Fuck yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And it's been super cool. It's been super cool. So, what I'll do, you know, here moving forward is, I'm just going to shout out everything for music, and then of course the new stuff, keep everyone tied into, all the good stuff coming up.
Thank you so much, man.
Cool. Thank you. Wow. Episode 21. I'm going to keep this short and sweet and just say thank you to Johann Stone for coming on, sharing these incredibly interesting ideas and experiences. I think it's so cool. So thank you to him. We both want to reiterate the point that we by no means are promoting this as a lifestyle change, as something to go and try and put compounds in your body, simply as an educational perspective and something as a fascinating conversational topic. So take all of this with a grain of salt. And of course, we by no means are saying to go and do anything crazy. Now, for future episodes, actually, one thing, let me also thank Brent Gee for sharing out his music at the beginning of the episode as well. I mentioned where to find both of those artists, but again, you can find them on Spotify, SoundCloud, or both of them on Instagram. So Johann Stone is Johann Stone Music on Instagram. Brent Gee is Brent Gee Music on Instagram. So you can go check out both their profiles, follow them, be tied in when more music is coming. Now, for next week, Rylan Taggart will be on the next episode. That is going to be releasing Wednesday. And a couple things to mention. I mean, I'm just so happy he is willing to jump on the podcast. He is the second music producer who has released on This Never Happened to come on and speak about releasing and to speak about the creative process behind his music. So an awesome episode all around. Really looking forward to having that out. We have recorded the episode already, but it'll be coming out next week. So that's it. Look for future episodes. I hope you're having an awesome start to 2019. I'm really looking forward to continuing to do these episodes, to seeing where this podcast goes in 2019. I'm really excited for all of it. Again, I hope you're enjoying them, and I look to speak with you all again soon.